Shedeur Sanders is being talked about like he's just a rookie quarterback. But the move he allegedly made off the field is what has brands and executives really uncomfortable. Because the internet is blowing up with one claim, Gatorade put a massive bag on the table, life-changing money, and Shedeur didn't just say no, he countered in a way most veterans don't even attempt. Not more cash, not more bonuses. Ownership. And if even part of that is true, it means we're watching a different kind of athlete walk into the NFL. The kind who understands the playbook on Sunday and the playbook in the boardroom. The kind who doesn't just want to wear a logo, he wants a piece of what his name builds. Now, are the numbers being exaggerated online? Maybe, but the strategy behind the story is real, and it could change how every young star negotiates from here on out. So what exactly is this prime equity blueprint? And why is it starting to scare the entire sports business world? The reason this story is spreading like wildfire isn't just because it involves Shedeur Sanders. It's because the numbers being thrown around are so huge, they don't even sound real. Viral posts and clips are claiming Gatorade came to Shedeur with a 3-year, $60 million offer to be the face of the brand, spokesperson, ambassador, the whole superstar package. And then, according to that same buzz, Shedeur allegedly did something almost no rookie is even in a position to try. He said no to the guaranteed check and pushed for ownership instead. Not more cash, not a bigger signing bonus, equity. The internet version of the story says he wanted a piece of what's being built off him, not just payment for showing up. The argument is basically, why take a one-time bag when you can own the machine that prints the bags? And if you know anything about how Deion Sanders talks, ownership, leverage, control, it sounds exactly like something that would come out of the Sanders camp. But here, where people need to slow down. Because the same viral threads that praise this as genius also stack claim on top of claim so fast that it becomes hard to tell what's confirmed and what's just traveling because it sounds good. Some posts even go as far as saying Shedeur demanded 3% of Gatorade USA, and that this one clause could make him the youngest billionaire in NFL history. That's the part that's doing the heavy lifting online. Because 3% doesn't sound like much until you realize Gatorade isn't some small startup. It's one of the biggest names in sports beverages on the planet. And if you're talking about ownership tied to that kind of scale, you're not talking about an endorsement deal anymore. You're talking about a business stake that could outgrow most playing contracts. Now add in the other viral proof points people keep attaching. The idea that his Nike deal supposedly explodes the moment he takes an NFL snap, or that he's negotiating jersey sales splits that rookies never get. Again, none of that is publicly laid out in a simple way fans can verify. But it keeps spreading because it fits the same theme. Shedeur isn't trying to be the next athlete with a check. He's trying to be the next athlete with a portfolio. And whether every number is accurate or not, one thing is already obvious. This story isn't going away because it hits a nerve the sports world has been dodging for years. What happens when a young star stops asking, "How much will you pay me?" and starts asking, "What do I own?" But before we call it a revolution, we've got to talk about the part that doesn't add up cleanly. Because if Shedeur truly asked for 3% ownership, that's not bold. That's borderline unheard of. Let's talk plainly for a second, because this is where the viral story goes from bold to wait, what? If the claim is literally true, if Shedeur demanded 3% ownership of Gatorade's US business, that's not a normal endorsement flex. That's the kind of stake that companies protect like a championship ring. Brands will pay athletes massive checks all day because a check is predictable. Equity is not. Equity means you're not just renting a face anymore, you're giving up part of the future. And that's why people should be careful about repeating the number like it's automatically confirmed. There's no easy public document that just shows, here's Shedeur's 3%. Big sponsorship structures can be private, layered, and written in ways that look like ownership but function like something else. Because here's what's more common in the real world. Athletes get royalties, profit participation, performance incentives, or equity tied to a specific product line, not a chunk of an entire legacy brand's core business. A deal can be described online as equity when it's actually, you get a percentage of sales from the Shedeur campaign, or you get stock-style upside if this product hits certain milestones. Still powerful, still wealth building, just not the same as owning 3% of the whole machine. And to understand why that distinction matters, think about who usually gets real ownership leverage. That's typically founders, early investors, or once-in-a-generation icons at the very top of the food chain. Even Michael Jordan's early Nike situation was own the company. It was a royalty structure that became legendary because the shoe line exploded. Ownership-level influence came later through the brand ecosystem that grew around him. So when fans hear 3%, they're not just hearing a contract term, they're hearing a power shift. Because if a rookie quarterback can set a precedent like that, true equity or anything close to it, then every young star after him is going to ask the same question. Why am I taking a flat fee while my face builds a billion-dollar pipeline for someone else? That's why this story has brands nervous, even if the numbers are exaggerated. The scary part for corporations is Shedeur specifically. It's the idea that athletes are finally learning the difference between being paid and being positioned. Paid is a check. Positioned is an asset that keeps paying when you're not trending, when you're injured, when you're retired. And if the Sanders camp is really pushing that philosophy, ownership first, control always, then the Gatorade rumor is just the loudest example of a bigger strategy. Now the real question becomes, if the exact 3% number is fuzzy, what could Shedeur realistically be negotiating that still functions like equity? And why would a brand even agree to it? Even if you don't believe every viral number flying around, the mindset behind this story is extremely believable because it sounds exactly like Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur has always preached the same principle: chase greatness and the money will chase you. But behind that quote is a deeper message he learned the hard way: money without leverage is temporary. The real game is control, ownership, making sure your name doesn't just sell a product, but actually earns you a piece of what your name creates. That's what people mean when they talk about a prime equity clause. Not necessarily a literal clause that's copy and pasted into every contract, but a strategy, a way of negotiating that starts from one question: who owns the value after I leave? Because Shedeur lived the old model. Athletes were marketed like superheroes, but treated like rentals. Brands used their image, teams used their name, and when the player's prime ended, the money usually slowed down unless the athlete had already built something outside the sport. So when Shedeur enters the league with a built-in brand, nil experience, and a father who's obsessed with leverage, it makes sense that his deals would look different. The equity conversation isn't just about one contract, it's about the posture he walks into every room with. He's not negotiating like a rookie who needs permission. He's negotiating like a company. And that's why you keep seeing the same themes attached to him, whether it's Gatorade, Nike, or jersey sales rumors: profit participation, ownership-style upside, and maximum control of his image. The goal isn't just get paid. The goal is keep the faucet running no matter what football does. That's generational thinking. Most rookies are focused on making a roster and getting a second contract. Shedeur's camp is thinking about what happens after contract number 6. What happens when his kids or grandkids inherit the structure he built while he was still playing. And this is where the Sanders name becomes a cheat code. Not because it guarantees success on the field, but because it guarantees attention off the field. Brands don't just buy talent, they buy reach, they buy narrative, they buy cultural influence. Shedeur walks into the league with all of that before he even wins an NFL game. That gives him leverage that most fifth-round picks could never dream of. Which is why the most important part of this story is, did Gatorade really offer $60 million? The important part is that people believe Shedeur could look at a $60 million offer and say, "That's cool, but what do I own?" Because whether or not the exact terms are real, that mindset is real, and it's already spreading. Young athletes are watching, agents are watching, brands are watching, and the second one superstar successfully gets equity-style upside, the endorsement economy has to adjust. But none of this happens without one thing that changed the entire sports business landscape: nil. Because nil is what taught this generation how to negotiate before they ever got to the league. Here's the piece older analysts keep missing when they talk about Shedeur, like he's too business-minded for a rookie. This isn't 2006 anymore. Nil turned college football into a real marketplace, and it trained a whole generation of players to think like entrepreneurs before they ever shook an NFL commissioner's hand. They didn't just learn how to run a route or read a coverage. They learned how brand deals work, how contracts get structured, and how quickly a company can profit off your name if you don't protect it. That's why the equity rumors around Shedeur, real numbers or not, feel believable to people who understand the era. Because nil doesn't just give you money, it gives you reps, negotiation reps, media reps, relationship reps. It teaches you that the value isn't just what you do on the field, it's what your attention is worth off it. And once you've lived inside that system, it's hard to go back to the old model where a rookie is supposed to be grateful for whatever gets slid across the table. This also explains why skip the combine and throw at pro day became such a big narrative fight with Shedeur and not with quieter prospects. Nil-era stars know how to control presentation. They know how one bad clip can live forever. They know how the whisper network works. So they manage their showcases like a product launch, not like a random workout. And if you connect that to the Gatorade story, you see the bigger trend. Nil created players who don't just accept endorsement deals, they negotiate for structure. They ask questions like, do I get a one-time check, or do I get recurring upside? Am I just an ad, or am I a partner? Who owns the content? Who controls my image? What happens after year 3? That's the mindset behind equity-style thinking, even if the viral 3% claim is exaggerated. Because there are plenty of ways to build ownership like upside without literally owning a chunk of the whole company. Royalties tied to a product line, profit participation tied to a campaign, stock grants tied to a performance trigger, or a long-term deal that doesn't stop paying the moment the contract ends. And here, why brands can't just laugh it off. If you want the biggest stars in the nil era, you're going to have to meet them where they are. They've already seen what their name can generate. They've already watched how fast jerseys sell and how quickly a social post can move product. So when they show up asking for more than a check, it's not greed. It's a negotiation shaped by experience. Which brings us to the real heart of the story. Whether Shedeur turned down $60 million or not, the direction is clear. Athletes aren't just chasing endorsements anymore. They're chasing assets. And once that becomes normal, the next fight won't be about how much a brand pays a player. It'll be about how much of the business the player is allowed to own. This is the part most fans understand instinctively, even if they don't use business language. A big check feels like winning, but ownership is how you stay winning. Cash is loud, it's instant, it's easy to post. 3 years, $60 million is a headline you can feel, but cash also starts shrinking the second it hits your account. Taxes, fees, lifestyle, investments that don't hit, and the simple truth that money sitting still loses power over time. Equity is quieter, but it grows. That's why this whole Shedeur story, whether the exact terms are true or not, has people arguing like it's a philosophical fight. Because it's not just about what he made, it's about how he thinks. If you take the big check, you're paid for what you did. If you get ownership-style upside, you're paid for what your name continues to do. That's the difference between being rich and being wealthy. Rich is income. Wealth is assets. And that's why the idea of an equity clause matters so much in sports. Athletes are the engine of the entire machine. Their faces sell the shoes, the drinks, the jerseys, the subscriptions. But the traditional model is designed so the athlete gets a check while the company keeps the long-term upside. That's how you end up with legends who made millions but built billions for someone else. So even if 3% of Gatorade USA is exaggerated, the principle still holds. If Shedeur negotiated any deal that functions like equity, royalties, profit share, stock-based upside, he's playing a long game most rookies don't even get to see. And here's the scary part for the sports establishment. Once one young star proves this can work, everybody else starts asking for it. Agents start getting pressure from their clients. Why doesn't my deal have upside like that? Rookies start realizing they don't have to wait 10 years to negotiate like a veteran. Brands realize the price of landing top athletes isn't just money anymore. It's giving up control. That's why this story keeps circling back to Dayan. Because Dayan isn't just teaching Shedeur how to throw a football or handle cameras. He's teaching him how not to get used, how not to become the product while somebody else becomes the owner. And that explains something that fans noticed even during the draft process. The same confidence people called arrogant on the football side is the same confidence that makes a player walk into a boardroom and negotiate power. That's why the criticism always sounds different with Shedeur. It's not just can he play, it's can we control him? And the moment you believe he's negotiating equity, controlling jersey revenue, and protecting his image rights, the answer becomes clear. Control is not part of the deal anymore. Which is exactly why the next stage of this story is going to be the most interesting. What does a realistic, equity-style athlete deal actually look like behind the headlines? And what kind of leverage does Shedeur truly have as a young QB? This is where a lot of people get tripped up, because they hear equity and imagine a rookie literally walking into a Fortune 500 boardroom and claiming a slice of the entire corporation. That's usually not how it works. In the real sports business world, equity-style leverage often shows up in structures that function like ownership, without needing the athlete to actually own 3% of a giant legacy brand. And if Shedeur is really pushing this approach, it could look like a few different things that are both realistic and still game-changing. One version is royalties tied to a signature product line. That's not a one-time check. That's a percentage of every unit sold. If the product becomes a staple, the money keeps coming whether you're having an MVP season or rehabbing an injury. Another version is profit participation on a specific campaign or business segment. That's closer to the "I want a piece of what's being built off me" idea, still limited in scope, but powerful if the campaign is huge. A third version is stock grants or stock options tied to performance triggers. You hit certain milestones, sales numbers, engagement metrics, campaign performance, and you unlock ownership upside. It's a way for brands to protect themselves while still giving the athlete the long-term lever he's asking for. Then there's the piece most fans ignore, but brands care about even more: image rights and approval power. Even without owning the company, a player can negotiate control over how their name, likeness, and content are used. That means no random ads that damage your brand, no weird partnerships you didn't sign off on, no team or third-party gatekeeper demanding a cut just because your jersey has their logo on it. If Shedeur's camp is serious about wealth building, this part might be the real engine. Because the money isn't just in the check, it's in keeping your brand clean enough that better deals keep lining up year after year. And this is why the Gatorade rumor matters even if the numbers are exaggerated. The exact percentage might be hype, but the direction is not. The direction is athletes asking for deals that keep paying after the contract ends. Now connect this back to the Sanders philosophy. Dayan's whole message is, don't chase money, chase greatness, then use that greatness to negotiate ownership. That's the blueprint. Shedeur's job on the field creates the leverage. Then, off the field, he turns that leverage into assets, things that don't disappear when his rookie contract is up. So whether it's literally 3% of Gatorade or a royalty profit share structure that the internet simplified into equity, the bigger truth is the same. Shedeur is negotiating like a brand, not like a rookie. And once brands accept that from one young star, it changes what the next young star will demand, which is exactly why the old guard, teams, media, even some sponsors, seem uneasy when a player is this confident before he's even had a full NFL career. Because confidence on the field is one thing. Confidence at the negotiating table, that changes the entire power dynamic. This is the part people don't say out loud, but you can feel it in the way the conversation shifts the moment Shedeur's name comes up. The NFL and the sports endorsement world are built on control. Teams want to control messaging. Brands want to control campaigns. The league wants to control image. Even the media benefits from control because controlled narratives are easier to package and sell. Equity disrupts all of that. Because the second an athlete is negotiating ownership-style upside, he's not just a face on a billboard anymore. He's a stakeholder. He has long-term leverage. He can say no without panicking. He can walk away from a bad partnership. He can demand better terms because he's not desperate for the next check. That independence is what makes traditional systems uncomfortable. It's also why the same traits people call arrogant on a football stage get rebranded as dangerous in a business room. When a young quarterback says, "I want equity," what some people really hear is, "I'm not going to be easily managed." And once a player isn't easily managed, every part of the old playbook gets weaker. The smear language loses power because the athlete can respond directly with his own platform. The be grateful messaging doesn't work because the athlete already knows his value. Even draft position matters less because the off-field income and ownership upside can dwarf what the rookie contract was supposed to control. That's why this story hits harder than the money. It's a power shift. If Shedeur, especially as a fifth-round pick in the viral version of the story, can negotiate like this, then what stops a first-round superstar from demanding the same? What stops the next generation from walking in and saying, "I don't want an endorsement, I want a partnership, I want ownership, I want my image rights protected, I want my revenue stream stacked"? Brands know where that leads. It leads to thinner profit margins, more negotiation complexity, less one-sided deals where the company keeps the upside and the athlete gets the check. It forces companies to treat athletes like business equals, not marketing tools. And the NFL side gets nervous too, because independent athletes are harder to pressure, harder to silence, harder to box in. If a player can make more off the field than some veterans make in total salary, the usual do what we say or else, leverage starts disappearing. Which is why Dayan's influence matters here. Dayan isn't teaching Shedeur to rebel for attention. He's teaching him to build a structure where nobody can quietly take from him without paying him correctly. And if that's really what's happening behind these rumored deals, then the sports world isn't watching a rookie cash out. They're watching a rookie rewrite the rules. Now the only question left is whether this becomes a one-off story tied to the Sanders name, or the beginning of a new era where every elite athlete walks into negotiations with the same mindset. Because if that happens, the endorsement economy doesn't just change. It flips. Here's the truth. The internet might be inflating the numbers, the percentages, and the youngest billionaire talk, but it can't fake the direction of the trend. Athletes are done being the product. They're trying to be the partner. And Shedeur Sanders, because of Nil, because of Dayan's blueprint, because of the spotlight he walks with, represents the cleanest example of that shift we've seen in a long time. Even if 3% of Gatorade USA is more rumor than receipt, the concept behind it is real. Royalties, profit participation, equity-style upside, image control, and deals designed to keep paying long after football stops. That's why this story keeps hitting nerves. Because it proves something the old model doesn't want rookies to understand. Leverage isn't only about draft position or years in the league. Leverage is attention, culture, and the ability to walk away. So if Shedeur is really negotiating like this at 22, imagine what his deals look like at 27 when he's established and the brand value is even higher. That's what companies are watching. That's what teams are watching. And that's what every young athlete is learning from. Now I want to hear from you. Should athletes start demanding ownership in brand deals? Or is that a line companies will never truly cross? And do you think the media will call it genius or entitlement, depending on who's doing it?